In 1998, when Laurin Hill was recording her debut solo album, she was on a mission. She was aiming for big hits so she could outshine the Fugees and outshine Wyclef, says someone familiar with the sessions. Her 1996 album with the Fugees, The Score, had sold more than 17 million copies and made her rich and famous. But something was missing. After The Score, many perceived Wyclef Jean as the group's musical genius. Hill began plotting an album of her own that would change that. Her solo career wasn't based on "I want to do an album," says Roots drummer Amir Thompson. It was based on not being Wyclef's side girl. 12 million people bought The Miseducation of Laurin Hill, and Hill was established as one of the great female MCs, a quadruple threat, a rapper as well as a world-class singer, songwriter, and producer. She was critically acclaimed and extremely rich. In 1998 and 99, sources say Hill grossed $40 million from royalties, advances, touring, merchandising, and other revenues, and pocketed about $25 million of that. When the singer was 13 years old, she already knew she would grow up to become an entertainer. In 98, Hill became an international superstar. Hollywood beckoned her onto the A-list. Sources say she was offered a role in Charlie's Angels, but turned the part down, and Lucy Liu took the job. Hill met with Matt Damon about being in The Bourne Identity, Brad Pitt about a part in The Mexican, and the Wachowski brothers about a role in the last 2 films in the Matrix trilogy. She turned down lots of work. Laurin wasn't trying to do anything, says Pras Michel of the Fugees, almost lamenting. But she did begin developing a biography of Bob Marley in which she was to play his wife, Rita, started producing a romantic comedy film set in the world of soul food called Sauce, in which she was to star, and accepted a prized part in the adaptation of Toni Morrison's Beloved, but had to drop out because she got pregnant. The doors were open for Hill to create a multimedia entertainment empire of the sort that J-Lo, Janet, and Madonna have built. Hill could have been J-Lo with political substance. Someone who once worked with the singer says with regret, she would have been bigger than J-Lo. Instead, she disappeared. So, what really happened? I think Laurin grew to despise who Laurin Hill was, a friend says. Not that she despised herself as a human being, but she despised the manufactured international superstar magazine cover girl who wasn't able to go out of the house looking a little tattered on a given day. Because Laurin is such a perfectionist, she always sought to give the fans what they wanted, so a simple run to the grocery store had to have the right heels and jeans. Artists are a lot more calculating than the public sometimes knows. It doesn't happen by accident that the jeans fall the right way, the hat is cocked to the side just so. All of that stuff is thought about, and Laurin put a lot of pressure on herself after all that success, and then one day she said, "F it." In 2000, Hill became close with brother Anthony, a shadowy spiritual advisor, then abruptly fired her management team and the people around her. In 2001, she recorded her MTV Unplugged 2.0. Few bought the album, but many talked about how she could be heard on the record breaking down in tears and saying, "I'm crazy and deranged, I'm emotionally unstable," and repeatedly rejecting celebrity and the illusions that make it possible. "I used to get dressed for y'all. I don't do that anymore," she said on the album. "I used to be a performer, and I really don't consider myself a performer anymore. I had created this public persona, this public illusion, and it held me hostage. I couldn't be a real person because you're too afraid of what your public will say. At that point, I had to do some dying," she says. Her honesty was both touching and confusing. She was rejecting so much of what she'd spent years being. The only thing that was clear was that she was suffering. "Artists do fall apart," a record executive says. "The most commonly held falsity in the game is that they have it all together. They fall apart. Look at Mariah, Whitney, Michael, all the great ones. They all have a moment where you go, are they really all there?" And I think Laurin chose to expose that to the world. Until around 2003, the then 28-year-old Hill lived in a high-end hotel in Miami with Rohan Marley, the man she called her husband, and her 4 children. Her 4th child was born that summer. Sources say that not long before, Hill moved out of the hotel and that her relationship with Marley was over. She insisted on being called Ms. Hill, not Laurin, and was working on a new album, albeit very slowly. I heard from a friend that she doesn't really want to do music right now, Praz said. I heard from another friend that she wants to do a Fugees album. So, what caused the Laurin Hill of Miseducation, viewed as regal and brilliant, to morph into the Laurin Hill of Unplugged, seen as possibly unstable, and then into someone willfully absent from the public? Confidential conversations with more than 20 friends and industry figures and a lengthy interview with Praz clarified much of what happened during the 5 years since her zenith. I don't think she's crazy, Praz said. People tend to say that when they don't understand what someone's going through. Walk in her shoes and see what you would do. Hill was born in 1975 and raised in middle-class South Orange, New Jersey. By her teens, she was determined to have a career in entertainment. At 13, she sang on Showtime at the Apollo. The audience was rough on her, and after the show, she cried. In 1998, her mother, Valerie Hill, told Rolling Stone about her post-Apollo talk with her young daughter. I said, "Now, if every time they don't scream and holler you're gonna cry, then perhaps this isn't for you," Valerie recalled. And she looked at me like I had taken leave of my senses. To her, the mere suggestion that this wasn't for her was crazy. At 17, Laurin had a role on the daytime soap As the World Turns. 2 years later, she appeared in Sister Act 2, Back in the Habit, and had a small role in Steven Soderbergh's King of the Hill. Meanwhile, she also spent nights working on music with friends Wyclef Jean and Pras Michel. She was 18 when the band's 1994 debut, Blunted on Reality, flopped, but 2 years later, with The Score, the Fugees' cover of Killing Me Softly made her a star. She was sex symbol beautiful, and her music and public persona seemed politically savvy and spiritually aware. After the explosion of The Score, Jean began recording a solo album. Hill and Pras supported him emotionally and creatively, but when Hill started writing her own songs, Jean showed no interest. Pras says, "I remember when Pepsi wanted her for a commercial and they were like, 'All we want is you. We don't need the other two cats.' She said, 'Without them, I'm not doing it.' There's a lot of things she didn't do because of the group. Then when she goes to work on her music and she doesn't have the support, that can have an effect mentally. She felt, this is based on conversations we had, she felt there was no support on that angle. When you feel the ones you stuck your neck out for ain't doing the same for you, it brings a certain animosity and bitterness," Pras explained. Once, the three Fugees were close friends, but now Pras has little good to say about Jean. "He's the cancer of the Fugees," Pras lamented. "He's the cancer. You can quote me. He's the reason why it got wrecked to begin with. He's the reason why it's not fixed." Is he the reason for Hill's troubles? Maybe, indirectly, she's where she's at because of him, the Fugees member confirmed. Maybe, but not directly. Wyclef Jean politely declined to be interviewed. "I'm somewhere else in my head," he said on the phone from his studio. "Certain things I don't talk about, I'm in another zone." "I wish it didn't go down the way it went," he summed it up. Around the same time, Hill responded to an email request for an interview. "I am not available for free interviews at this time," she wrote. "The only interviews I will consider are those that amply compensate me for my time, energy, and story." It was signed Ms. Hill. She asked for money, friends say because she felt she was being exploited by the media and the record industry. When One World magazine contacted her about a cover story, she demanded $10,000. People close to the Fugees said there was always competition between Jean and Hill. "Not competing for something in particular," said one. "It's more competing just who's better, who's greater." Hill's solo music was intended to settle the matter. When Jean finally came around and offered his production assistance on the record, she no longer wanted it. She said to Jean, "I'm thinking about working with this producer and that producer," a friend remembers. He said, "Oh no, I'm producing your whole album." She chewed on that for a minute and then said, "Nah, I got my own vision." That's when who Laurin really is started to take form, the friend remembers. At the same time, the singer's love life began to get really complicated. For years, she'd been clandestinely dating Gian. Their relationship started long before he married his wife and continued afterward. But Pras said, "I think he was kinda like playing with her emotions." But in the summer of '96, when the Fugees were on the Smoke and Grooves tour, she met Rohan Marley, who was on the tour with his brother Ziggy. both sons of Bob Marley. At first, Hill was uninterested in Rohan, a former University of Miami football player, because she was still seeing Gene. Honestly, she didn't even want the relationship, says a friend. Everyone was pushing her towards Marley to get her out of the other thing. They pushed her towards him like, "Why don't you give him a chance? Come on, go out on a date, just do it." Not knowing that this man had all this other baggage and drama in his life. Praz singled out Hill's first pregnancy as a turning point for the group. "When she got pregnant, things definitely started going on," he says. "Things got crazy." While Hill's stomach grew, the Fuji camp wondered whether the baby was Marley's or Gene's. Says a friend, "The conversation between everyone on the low was no one knew until that baby came out." The day Hill went into labor, Gene told a source he was flying to her side to see his new child. "People don't know how calculating she can be," Hill's friend said. "Laurin used Roe to pull herself out of the relationship with Clef, and she happened to get pregnant. She hoped that the baby was Wyclef's because it would have forced his hand. But it wasn't." Hill named her first child Zion Marley. For years, the singer claimed that she was married to Rohan Marley, but at some point after Zion was born, Hill got another surprise. Someone told her Marley already had a wife. On March 18, 1993, when he was a sophomore at the University of Miami, Marley married an 18-year-old woman from New Jersey in a ceremony in Miami. The reason Hill and Marley aren't married is because Roe is already married, the singer's friend confirmed. Sources said Marley had 2 children from the marriage. Hill decided to ignore it. "I think she was kind of like, put it in the closet and don't even pay attention to it," remembers her friend. Several sources could find no record of the dissolution of Marley's marriage, and even now, it's unclear whether Hill and Marley were ever married in a conventional sense. "She has her own rules about life," another friend says. According to her, she's married. Marriage to her is not a piece of paper, and it's not part of some civilization or civilized action. If you say to her, "You're not married," she'll say, "What? Do I have to get a government official to tell me I'm married?" It was critical that on Miseducation, Hill was credited as the sole auteur. That was why she had to be seen as doing it all herself, says someone familiar with the sessions. To show, "I'm better than Wyclef. He's getting credit as the genius in the group, I'm the genius in the group." But when musicians collaborate in the studio, it's often difficult to establish exactly who has written what. "It gets real gray in the studio," one artist says. At the time, people close to her suggested Hill needed documentation that would define everyone's role, but she was against the idea. Laurin said, "We all love each other. This ain't about documents. This is blessed." The album was released crediting Hill with having produced, written, and arranged all the music except one track, and she was established as a self-contained musical genius. Then she was sued by 4 men who had worked on the record, who alleged that she had claimed full credit for music that they'd been at least partly responsible for. Her label, Columbia, urged her to settle, but she wanted to fight. "She felt settling would have been an admission of guilt," says a friend. "She was very concerned about credit. It's what eluded her from the past success with the Fugees. She didn't want to be just a pretty face and a pretty voice. She wanted people to know she knows what she's doing. But she had to go into depositions and discuss making her art with lawyers. That F-ed with her," another friend says. Eventually, the singer settled the suit. A source said the 4 producers were paid $5 million. It wasn't nearly as painful financially as it was emotionally. A friend says, "That was the beginning of a chain effect that would turn everything a little crazy." She was far from the first recording artist to have a crisis of faith and career, but few have had such a crisis so publicly. She was a working mother of 2 who, according to many, was unhappy in her relationship. She felt pressure to look like a model whenever she left the house. She had several family members working for her or supporting her. "To have your whole family depend on you for their well-being, that can be a lot of pressure," says the singer's friend. "I said, if I was in that situation, I would snap." And she felt betrayed by the musicians she'd considered family, and thus was increasingly distrustful of people in general. Friends say she wanted to get out but didn't know how. "It was tough for her to admit all that to someone," a friend says. So, I think she spoke to God, and maybe it wasn't God, but somebody showed up. Another friend says, a person came in and they divided and conquered. They destroyed this whole thing. Around this time, Hill met a religious figure named Brother Anthony, a tall black man in his 40s. Within 3 months, she was going to Bible study with him 2 or 3 times a week. A friend says Brother Anthony taught Hill that she should be whoever she wants to be because she doesn't owe her fans anything. God didn't create us to be beholden unto people and entertain them. God holds us to be the people that we want to be, so she was told. The two became inseparable, and Hill began starting many of her sentences with the words, Brother Anthony says. Shortly after recording Unplugged, she told MTV Online, I met someone who has an understanding of the Bible like no one else I ever met in my life. I just sat at his feet and ingested pure scripture for about a year. But the singer's friends found Brother Anthony bizarre. His whole demeanor was really possessive, aggressive, and crooked to me, a friend says. You know how people are slick? He's a quick talker. No one was certain what church he was from or what religion he belonged to. I don't think he had a religion, a friend says. I think he was more like, my interpretation of the Bible is the only interpretation of the Bible. I'm the only one on earth that knows the truth. Brother Anthony was definitely on some other shit, Pross also concurs. I had a tape of his teachings. That shit is ill. F-ed me up. I can't really explain it. It was some weird shit, man. It was some real cult shit. When I heard the tape, I couldn't believe that this dude was really serious. He was saying, give up all your money. I don't know if that meant give it to me or whatever, but on the tape, he said money doesn't mean anything. Many believe Brother Anthony drove a wedge between Hill and the rest of the world. It was like she was being brainwashed by this man, a friend says, believing everything he was saying and telling her what to do. Another friend says, I think he's just looking at a cash cow. She recorded her MTV Unplugged 2.0 in July 2001 while she was pregnant with her 3rd child, Joshua. In a rehearsal the day before, Hill ripped up her throat but refused to reschedule, and on the record, her voice is raspy and ragged. She accompanied herself on guitar, the lone instrument on the album, which was courageous given that she hadn't been studying very long. But a veteran industry executive said, anyone with ears can hear there are only 3 chords being played on every song. I saw it with a room full of professionals, and someone said, I feel like jumping out a window. A lesser artist, it would have never been released, another industry insider says. A lesser artist would have been shot and thrown out the window. Unplugged sold just 470,000 records, a failure. Another industry insider says, I'm sure Columbia lost money on it. In the past few years around the time, Hill had been in Miami, where she was working on a new album. She's determined to get full credit this time. A lot of different people have been called down there and had strange experiences, said an industry figure. Sources say the musicians were required to sign a waiver, giving Hill sole writing credit for the tracks they worked on. The sessions went slowly. A few people spoke of her flying in a gang of top-flight musicians, putting them in a nice hotel and paying for their time. But for more than a week, they sat around each day, expecting to play, then getting a call saying, we'll start tomorrow. Eventually, they all left without ever getting into the studio. Hill's struggle continued for years, but not even that could shadow the success of her first solo album. The miseducation opened up a lot of doors of success for Laurin, doors that were even larger than the ones that she went through as a star of a group. Her star would shine even brighter as she would be the first woman to be nominated for 10 Grammy Awards in 1 year and set another record by winning 5 in one night. Her rise to success was well earned, as The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill would remain one of the greatest albums to have come out within the decade. Hill would have not only become a successful artist, but a positive spokesperson for positive black women and a classified S symbol. But as the notorious B.I.G. once potently quoted, the more money you make, the more problems you will see, and Hill's shining star would slowly crumble, starting with lawsuits from New Ark, the group of musicians that heavily contributed to her album, claiming that they co-wrote or produced 95% off the album, as we've already heard. This accusation was very heavy at the time. It had many people believing that Hill was a fraud for not writing all of her music. The fame started becoming too much for the singer to handle, and she became dissatisfied with everything around her. I had to step away when I realized that, for the sake of the machine, I was being way too compromised. I felt uncomfortable about having to smile in someone's face when I really didn't like them or even know them well enough to like them, the singer is quoted saying in the past. The rumors began to swarm about Hill over the years, that she started doing drugs, she had a nervous breakdown, she joined a cult, or just flat out went crazy. But as mentioned earlier, a lot of the answers to those questions would be revealed on an MTV special, Unplugged, where Hill made her first public appearance in years to perform some new material. This was a different Laurin. A Laurin who was battling depression, her trademark locks were replaced with a headband and a baseball cap. She sat on a stool with her guitar, looking like a lost soul looking for a way out of the lifestyle that she had chosen. A lot of the new material reflected on heartache, pain, and the truth behind the record industry who she felt tried to silence her voice and suppress her. She would soon vanish again after this performance. But it wasn't until 2004 at the Dave Chappelle Block Party where she would reunite with Clef and Pra to perform the Fugees' classic Fugee La. It was a shocker, built heavy anticipation for a reunion album, and showed that the group could still work together as a trio. But like before, egos would once again clash with Clef, claiming that Hill was in diva mode by wanting to be referred to as Miss Hill instead of Laurin Hill. She would continue the diva-like behavior by not showing up for rehearsals and being late for shows. The highly anticipated reunion would soon fizzle, with the singer claiming the Fugees was a conspiracy to control, manipulate, and encourage dependence. I took a lot of abuse that many people would not have taken in these circumstances, she claimed. Continuing her erratic behavior over the years, Hill would make her return doing shows in a bizarre different look. Many of her appearances over the years have been made wearing a clown wig, bad makeup, and circus outfits, with her further angering her fans by constantly showing up, usually 45 to 50 minutes late doing shows. Her once beautiful voice became very raspy, along with the fact that it's clear that the singer was either battling some serious demons or soul-searching for a way out of the matrix. The bottom line is this was a sad way for somebody with the superior talent of Laurin Hill to go out. Her ego clashes with the Fugees, along with her personal vendettas with her record label and ex-husband, and her egotism may have led to her breakdown. But if you look at the bigger picture, the singer may have gone this route to keep herself from selling her soul back to the companies that made her a star and also made her miserable. The truth is, Hill may have found the truth about the industry, but it scared her to the point where she no longer wanted to involve herself. It's a situation similar to where Dave Chappelle walked away from a $300 million deal offered by Comedy Central. Dave saw the bigger picture that the corporations were going to control his image, his show, and his life, so he did what many were afraid to do, and that's walking away. It's been decades since the release of Hill's only solo studio album, and though she has released little of any note since she retains a certain mystique that draws a certain curiosity. What is she doing with her time? How many kids does she have? Is she broke? Will she return to her former glory? What was with that strange acoustic set she did for MTV back in whenever that was 2002? Most importantly, her most dedicated fans have wondered, when will she produce another great piece of art? They loved the score and Miseducation so much for so long that they'll do anything to have her come back. Who does one album that sells 6 million copies in the US alone, and another that sells 8 million and then just stops? Laurin Hill says her heart was in Zion. I wish her heart still was in Ryman, Kanye West said on Champion on his 2007 album Graduation. It tells you something about her place in the music's pantheon, that 9 years after Miseducation, one of the premier artists of the last decade was still wishing for her return. The problem is, when you look back at her history, she hasn't been as absent as it seems. She's released a number of forgettable songs. The Passion from the Passion of the Christ movie soundtrack, a remix of John Legend's So High, a music video called Social Drugs, Lose Myself from the animated Surf's Up film soundtrack, Fearless Vampire Killer, Neurotic Society. She's toured unsuccessfully with the Fugees. She's done a sporadic series of sloppy, disjointed concerts. And yet when we think of her, it's often of that moment frozen in time, masterpiece Miseducation. Some have blamed Hill's relationship and family life for her career's downward spiral. She has 6 children, 5 of them with longtime partner Rohan Marley. And sure, it's not uncommon for someone's priorities to change when they start a family, but many don't buy it. Having a child was the inspiration for one of her greatest songs, To Zion. And if she'd accomplished enough in her career and wanted to devote her life to her family, more power to her. That would be an honorable choice. However, much of Hill's fade from the mainstream seems to have to do with some vague protests from authorities, the media, and other institutional forces. When she shut down her nonprofit refugee project, aimed at helping urban youth, she reportedly made the following statement. "I had a nonprofit organization, and I had to shut all that down. You know, smiling with big checks, obligatory things, not having things come from a place of passion. That's slavery. Everything we do should be a result of our gratitude for what God has done for us. It should be passionate. Well, making obligatory appearances for your charitable organization is equivalent to slavery? Many of Hill's fans don't think so. Then, as mentioned earlier, there was a report by People magazine that during a short-lived reunion with the Fugees in 2005, she demanded to be called Ms. Hill and thought about changing her name to Empress. Not exactly the attitude of a grounded mother who doesn't care about fame. There has also been speculation about drug use because of her extreme statements and bizarre stage performances and cancellations due to health reasons. Her erratic behavior, paranoia, and overt religious fixation, though, suggests something more akin to mental illness or at least anguish. Marley once described her writing music in the bathroom, on toilet paper, on the wall. She writes it in the mirror if the mirror smokes up. This irrational side of her was played out most tangibly in her refusal to pay taxes. She was charged with tax evasion in 2012 for failing to pay $1.8 million in federal taxes, and in 2013, she served 3 months in prison for it. And her recent spate of tours, even if the performances have been getting better, can't help but seem like a money grab. Hill wrote a lengthy post on Tumblr before going to prison about the various historical abuses that have occurred, the hypocrisy of the IRS, and the terror of the system. Whether or not she has a point seems sort of unrelated to her own personal story. She's a beloved artist from middle-class New Jersey. Some of her fans keep asking, what is she so mad about, and why hasn't she been able to channel it into a coherent musical statement? That kind of emotion should inspire something big and important. It would be great to hear. Her fans would be thrilled if she somehow generated a new work of genius. In fact, they really don't care about her public statements or even her indiscretions with the law. Certainly other artists are guilty of far worse. They just want the music. Lately, it has been reported that Hill's health is getting worse. This happened this past year after she was forced to postpone a concert to prevent serious strain or damage to her vocal cords. The 48-year-old hip-hop artist was on her The Miseducation of Laurin Hill 25th anniversary tour alongside the Fugees. But she was forced to rearrange her gig in Philadelphia last October after she was ordered by a doctor to rest her voice. The Killing Me Softly songstress wrote on Instagram, "Dear Philadelphia, it is with disappointment that I am writing this note to you. On the advice of my physicians, I have no choice but to postpone the show. I need to rest my voice to prevent any more serious strain or damage to my vocal cords." She continued, writing, "The start of this tour has been incredible. What an amazing experience to celebrate this anniversary with all of my family, my friends, and all of you. I look forward to giving you the show you deserve with a fully recovered and healthy voice." Fans expressed their well wishes for Laurin's health, but others were left disappointed after flying a long way to see her perform. One wrote on Instagram, "Just wish I hadn't flown up here just to see the show for my wife's birthday." Another said, "Finished 7+ hours of travel from Vegas, then got the email. Can't afford to come back in November. Are refunds available?" A third mourned, "What? No! I came from Spain only for this concert. I still can't believe it." Hill announced the North American tour in August last year, revealing she would perform the seminal 1998 record in full alongside her former band. In a statement, she reflected on the Grammy-winning LP, saying, "The Miseducation of Laurin Hill is and was a love song to my parents, my family, my people, my musical and cultural forebears, my teachers, my loves, my creator." She continued, "I wrote love songs and protest songs, still love songs about the subjects and interests that inspired and moved me. I was confident that what inspired me would resonate with an audience that had been led to believe that songs of that kind could only live in the past. I loved music. I loved people. I truly felt grateful to God for my life and genuinely blessed to have a platform where I could share wisdom and perspective through music. I felt a charge to challenge the idea that certain kinds of expression and/or certain kinds of people didn't belong in certain places. Her debut studio album sold 12 million copies following its release in August 1998. But fans never received another solo studio album from Hill. And in 2021, she finally revealed the reason why. The wild thing is, no one from my label has ever called me and asked, how can we help you make another album? Ever. Ever. Did I say ever? Ever. She confessed during Rolling Stone's 500 Greatest Albums podcast on Amazon Music. Dissatisfied with the music industry and the toll that began to mount on herself and her family, Hill withdrew from public life about a year after the record dropped. With the miseducation, there was no precedent. I was, for the most part, free to explore, experiment, and express, the star shared. She continued, after the miseducation, there were scores of tentacled obstructionists, politics, repressing agendas, unrealistic expectations, and saboteurs everywhere. People had included me in their own narratives of their successes as it pertained to my album, and if this contradicted my experience, I was considered an enemy. She added, artist suppression is definitely a thing. I won't go too much into it here, but where there should have been overwhelming support, there wasn't any. With that lack of support and subsequent stresses, Hill decided she didn't want to subject herself or her loved ones to another record, and all that came with that 2 decades ago. The warp speed I had to move at in order to defy the norm put me and my family under hyper-accelerated, hyper-tense, and unfortunately an underappreciated pace, Hill explained. I sacrificed the quality of my life to help people experience something that should have been unreachable before then. When I saw people struggle to appreciate what that took, I had to pull back and make sure I and my family were safe and good. I'm still doing that. 20 years since its release, The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill has earned its protected status as one of the few near-perfect albums in any genre. It's aged incredibly well, still revealing itself upon repeated listenings. And it also changed everything. Here's how. Firstly, it brought hip-hop to the mainstream. A year and a half before The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill arrived, hip-hop lost the second of its legendary rap giants when the notorious B.I.G. was murdered on March 9, 1997, following the death of Tupac Shakur on September 13, 1996. As hip-hop scrambled for an identity, straddling the line between bangers and manageable mainstream offerings, it was Hill who released an album that could rule in both worlds. For those still spiraling over hip-hop's intermittent and indiscriminate violence, it was easy to other the culture as a whole. Hill became a mainstream fixture, one that pop music preferred to claim. However, when she swept the Grammys pop category the following year, she said during an acceptance speech, "This is crazy because this is hip-hop music." The singer not only kicked pop's door in, but on behalf of hip-hop, she also made sure no one ever looked the other way again. Secondly, her album woke up the Grammys when it came to hip-hop. It's no secret that the Grammys and hip-hop have had a fair-weathered relationship, as rappers have struggled to be adequately and respectfully recognized by the Recording Academy for decades. On February 24, 1999, Hill made history at the 41st Grammy Awards, when she was the first hip-hop artist to win the Grammy for Album of the Year. She also was the first woman to take home 5 Grammy Awards in one night. Those were 2 milestones for the Grammys, thanks to Lauryn Hill, one for hip-hop and one for women in music. And lastly, Hill's album proved the future was female. Queen Latifah, Money Love, MC Lyte, Lil' Kim, Foxy Brown. The list goes on of women in hip-hop who all made dramatic changes to an art form that arguably existed as a vessel for men to grow while woman remained a novelty. Because of Hill's lyrical dexterity coupled with her commercial appeal on miseducation, she ultimately brought a brand new face to hip-hop, the face of a woman. Before Hill, it was femc this raced and femc that. And yes, there was and still is some residual novelty in having women in the space. But Hill has what many male rappers or mensees never get, a #1 album. So all in all, she may have been looking rusty for some time now, but her legacy and that of her debut album remain intact. But whatever the case may be, we all hope that Lauryn Hill can find truth and happiness, and not be fooled once again into being a pawn in the game. She is a magnificent artist who just so happened to have gotten lost somewhere along the way. She has made surprise appearances on albums from Kanye and Method Man, and had a song dedicated to her by Talib Kweli. We can only hope as fans that she can get her life together and return to the game with a healthy state of mind and a strong will to reveal the truth and fight the battle that has silenced many. And that's it from us today. Until next time. Thanks for watching.